Welcome everyone. Today I'm going to tell you one of the most famous and tragic stories in history, the story of the Titanic. You've probably heard about it, you've maybe seen the movie, but today I'm going to tell you the real story, the complete story, from the beginning to the end. And I'm going to tell it in simple English, so you can understand and learn at the same time. Now I know this story has some difficult words. Words about ships, about disasters, about the ocean. So here's what I'm going to do. Every time I say a difficult word, I will stop and explain what it means. Then we'll continue with the story. This way you learn English, and you learn history at the same time. So get comfortable. This is going to be about 23 minutes, and by the end you will know the real story of the Titanic. Let's begin. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you're standing on a dock in Southampton, England, April 10th, 1912. The air smells like salt and coal smoke. The crowd is excited, talking, moving around. And in front of you, rising like a steel mountain from the water, is the largest moving object ever built by human hands. 882 feet long, 175 feet tall, 46,000 tons of steel and luxury. The RMS Titanic. People are calling it the ship of dreams, the floating palace, the unsinkable ship. Reporters are writing headlines like, "Even God himself could not sink this ship." First-class passengers board in fur coats and top hats. Third-class passengers carry everything they own in old suitcases, dreaming of a new life in America. The ship's whistle blows, the crowd cheers, the Titanic begins to move. No one knows that in just 4 days, this dream will become the ocean's darkest nightmare. But here's the truth about the Titanic that most people don't know. The disaster wasn't caused by one mistake. It was caused by 7 small decisions, 7 tiny moments, 7 choices that alone would have meant nothing. But together, they became catastrophic. Catastrophic means causing complete destruction and disaster. Today I'm going to tell you that real story. The story of how confidence became arrogance. Arrogance means thinking you're so powerful that nothing can hurt you. How luxury became a trap. And how 1,500 people died because 7 small things went wrong at the exact same time. So let's go back to the beginning. Before we talk about the sinking, we need to understand the dream. The Titanic wasn't just a ship, it was a statement of power. In the early 1900s, Britain and Germany were in a competition. They wanted to build the biggest, fastest, most beautiful ocean liners in the world. Ocean liners are huge passenger ships that cross the ocean. Whoever controlled the Atlantic Ocean controlled global trade and power. The White Star Line, a British shipping company, wanted to win this race. So they hired a shipbuilder named Thomas Andrews to design something the world had never seen. A shipbuilder is a person who designs and builds ships. Not just one ship, 3 ships. The Olympic, the Titanic, the Britannic. Sister ships, massive, identical, unstoppable. The Titanic was the second ship built. Construction began in 1909 at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Ireland. A shipyard is a place where ships are built. 3,000 workers worked for 2 years. Riveters, welders, carpenters, painters. Riveters are workers who attach metal plates together using rivets. Rivets are strong metal pins that hold steel together. They used 3 million rivets to hold the steel plates together. They built 9 decks. They built a grand staircase, a swimming pool, a gymnasium, a Turkish bath, a library. First-class cabins had silk wallpaper, velvet curtains, and private walking areas. Third-class cabins, bunk beds and shared bathrooms, but still cleaner and nicer than most hotels at that time. This wasn't just transportation. This was luxury. This was the future. The Titanic cost $7.5 million to build. That's about $200 million today. And the most important feature, safety. The ship had 16 watertight compartments in the hull. The hull is the bottom part of the ship that touches the water. Watertight compartments are separate sealed sections that water cannot pass through. If water entered one compartment, doors would automatically close and seal it off. The ship could survive with up to 4 compartments flooded. Engineers said it was practically unsinkable. The press changed that to unsinkable, and people believed it. On April 10, 1912, the Titanic left Southampton for its maiden voyage. A maiden voyage means the very first trip of a new ship. Destination, New York City. 2,224 people were on board. First-class passengers included millionaires, aristocrats, and celebrities. Aristocrats are people from noble families like royalty. John Jacob Astor IV, one of the richest men in the world. Margaret Molly Brown. Isidore and Ida Strauss, owners of Macy's department store. Second-class passengers were middle-class families, teachers, and businessmen. Third-class passengers were immigrants. Irish, Italian, Swedish, Syrian. They were running from poverty, looking for opportunity, chasing the American dream. And then there was the crew. 885 people. Captains, engineers, stewards. Stewards are people who serve passengers on ships, cooks, musicians. The captain was Edward Smith, 62 years old, white beard, calm, 40 years of experience. This was supposed to be his last trip before retirement. He stood on the bridge. The bridge is the control room where the captain steers the ship, and reportedly said to a colleague, "I cannot imagine any condition which would cause a ship to founder." To founder means to sink or fail completely. Modern shipbuilding has gone beyond that. Confidence, absolute confidence. The Titanic stopped briefly in France, then Ireland. Then it headed west into the open Atlantic. The weather was perfect, the sea was calm, the passengers were happy. First-class guests drank champagne in the dining room. Third-class passengers danced to folk music. Children played, couples walked slowly, everyone felt safe. The ship was a dream. But 400 miles ahead, hidden in the darkness, something was waiting. Most people think the Titanic sank because it hit an iceberg. An iceberg is a huge piece of ice floating in the ocean. That's true, but it's not the whole truth. The iceberg didn't sink the ship, the decisions did. Let me show you. The first mistake, the ice warnings were ignored. On April 14, 1912, the Titanic received 6 ice warnings from other ships. 6 messages saying, "We see icebergs in your path, slow down, be careful." The wireless operators on the Titanic received these messages. Wireless operators are people who send and receive radio messages, but they were busy. Why? Because they were sending personal messages for wealthy passengers. "Dear mother, having a wonderful time. Love, Margaret. Stocks are up, buy more." The wireless system wasn't just for safety, it was a business. So when the 6th ice warning came in, the operator said, "Shut up, I'm busy." The captain saw some of the warnings, but not all, and even the ones he saw, he didn't slow down. The second mistake, the ship was going too fast. The Titanic was traveling at 22.5 knots. A knot is a measurement of speed at sea. That's about 26 miles per hour. In iceberg territory, at night with no moon. Why so fast? Because the White Star Line wanted to arrive in New York on time, maybe even early. Good publicity, impressive headlines. So Captain Smith didn't slow down. He trusted the lookouts. Lookouts are crew members who watch for danger from a high place on the ship. He trusted the ship. He believed they would see any danger in time. The third mistake, there were no binoculars. Binoculars are special glasses that make far-away things look closer. The 2 lookouts in the crow's nest were Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee. The crow's nest is a small platform high up on the ship where lookouts stand. Their job, watch for danger. But they didn't have binoculars. Why not? Because the binoculars were locked in a cabinet, and the officer who had the key had been moved to a different job before the trip. No one thought to break the lock. So Fleet and Lee stood in the freezing wind, looking into the darkness with just their eyes. The fourth mistake, the night was too calm. This sounds strange, but it's true. The ocean was perfectly calm that night. No waves, no wind, smooth like glass. Normally, when waves hit an iceberg, they create white foam at the base. Foam is white bubbles in water. This makes the iceberg easier to see. But on April 14th, there were no waves. The icebergs were invisible, black shapes in a black sea. The fifth mistake, the iceberg was seen too late. At 11:39 p.m., Frederick Fleet saw something. A dark shape right in front. He rang the warning bell 3 times. He grabbed the phone to the bridge. Iceberg right ahead. First Officer William Murdoch heard the warning. He had 37 seconds to react. He made a decision. Hard to starboard, full reverse. Starboard means the right side of a ship. He ordered the ship to turn left and the engines to go backwards. But here's the problem. If he had done nothing, if the ship had hit the iceberg straight from the front, the Titanic would have survived. The reinforced bow would have been damaged. The bow is the front of the ship. Reinforced means made extra strong. The first compartment, maybe the second, would have filled with water. But the ship would have stayed floating. Instead, by turning, the iceberg scraped along the side of the ship. It opened a 300-foot cut across 6 compartments. 6. The ship could survive 4 flooded compartments. Not 6. The sixth mistake, the rivets were weak. Modern investigations found something shocking. The rivets holding the steel plates together, especially near the front, were made of cheap iron, not steel. Why? To save money. When the iceberg scraped the hull, these weak rivets broke like buttons popping off. The steel plates separated. Water poured in. If the rivets had been stronger, the damage would have been smaller. The ship might have survived. The seventh mistake, there weren't enough lifeboats. A lifeboat is a small boat used to escape if the big ship sinks. The Titanic had 20 lifeboats, enough for 1,178 people. But there were 2,224 people on board. Why so few lifeboats? Because regulations were old. Regulations are official rules. The law only required lifeboats based on a ship's weight and size, not the number of people. And the White Star Line didn't want more lifeboats. They made the deck look messy. They blocked the view. So they followed the minimum legal requirement, the smallest amount allowed by law. Nothing more. When the ship began to sink, those 20 lifeboats became the difference between life and death. 7 mistakes, 7 small decisions. Alone they meant nothing. Together they killed 1,500 people. At 11:40 p.m. the Titanic hit the iceberg. Most passengers didn't even notice. Some felt a small shake, others heard a quiet grinding sound. But to most, it felt like nothing. In the first-class smoking room, men kept playing cards. In the third-class cabins, families kept sleeping. On deck, a few passengers picked up chunks of ice that had fallen from the iceberg and joked about it. Look, free ice for our drinks. But below deck in the boiler rooms, the crew knew. The boiler rooms are the rooms at the bottom where they burn coal to power the engines. Water was pouring in, fast. Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, was on board. He went down to check the damage. When he came back, his face was white with fear. He told Captain Smith, "The ship will sink in 1 hour, maybe 2. Captain Smith couldn't believe it. "Are you sure?" Andrews nodded. "Mathematical certainty. Absolutely sure, proven by math." At 12:05 a.m., the captain gave the order. Uncover the lifeboats, prepare to evacuate. Evacuate means to leave a dangerous place. But there was a problem. The crew had never practiced with the lifeboats. They didn't know which boat went where. They didn't know how to lower them correctly. They didn't know how many people each boat could hold. Chaos began. Chaos means total confusion and disorder. The officers started waking passengers and telling them to put on life jackets. But many refused. Why should I leave? This ship is unsinkable. It's freezing outside. I'm staying in my warm cabin. This is just a safety step. We'll be fine. First-class passengers were told first. They had the easiest way to reach the lifeboats. Third-class passengers. Many were locked below deck, not because people were cruel but because of immigration laws. Third-class passengers were kept separate to prevent disease. By the time someone unlocked the gates, many of the lifeboats were already gone. At 12:45 a.m., the first lifeboat was lowered. Lifeboat 7. It could hold 65 people. Only 28 were inside. Why? Because people still didn't believe the ship was sinking. The same thing happened again and again. Lifeboats that could hold 65 people left with 20, with 30, with 12. The officers shouted, "Women and children first." Some men tried to get on secretly. Some officers let them. Others pointed guns at them. John Jacob Astor, one of the richest men in the world, asked if he could go in a lifeboat with his pregnant wife. The officer said no. Astor stepped back. He lit a cigarette. He waited to die. Isidore and Ida Strauss were offered seats in a lifeboat. Ida refused. "I will not leave my husband. We have lived together for 40 years. If he stays, I stay." They sat together on deck chairs holding hands as the water rose. The musicians kept playing. The band stood on the deck and played calm, cheerful music to keep people from panicking. Panicking means becoming very scared and losing control. They played for over 2 hours as the ship tilted to one side. As the water climbed higher, as the lifeboats left, not one musician survived. By 2:00 a.m., the ship was leaning at a steep angle. The front was underwater. The back was rising into the air. The stern is the back of the ship. People held tightly to the railings. They slid down the deck. They jumped into the freezing water. At 2:17 a.m., the lights on the ship blinked and went out. At 2:20 a.m., the Titanic broke in half. The front section sank first, pulling the back straight up. For a moment, the back stood straight up like a building. Then it slid under the waves. The unsinkable ship was gone. Over 1,500 people were in the water. The ocean temperature was 28 degrees Fahrenheit, below freezing. A human body can survive in water that cold for about 15 minutes before hypothermia starts. Hypothermia is when your body gets so cold that your organs stop working. Most people died within 30 minutes. The lifeboats floated nearby, only half full. The survivors could hear screaming, crying, begging for help. But most lifeboats didn't go back. Why? They were afraid. Afraid the desperate people in the water would rush the boats and flip them over. Capsize means to flip over. Only one lifeboat, Lifeboat 14, went back to search for survivors. They pulled 4 people out of the water. 4 out of 1,500. The rest froze to death. At 4:00 a.m., the RMS Carpathia arrived. The Carpathia had received the Titanic's distress signal. A distress signal is an emergency call for help. They raced through the night, avoiding icebergs to reach the survivors. They pulled 712 people out of the lifeboats. 712 survivors, out of 2,224 passengers and crew. The survival numbers were very different by class. 62% of first-class passengers survived. 41% of second-class passengers survived. 25% of third-class passengers survived. Why? Because first-class passengers had easier ways to reach the lifeboats. They were closer to the deck. They were told first. Third-class passengers were trapped below. By the time they reached the deck, it was too late. When the Carpathia arrived in New York on April 18th, the world was shocked. Newspapers printed huge headlines: "Titanic sinks, 1,500 dead." Families gathered at the docks desperate for news. Some were brought back together with loved ones. Others learned their husbands, fathers, sons, and daughters were gone forever. Investigations began immediately. Both the American and British governments wanted to know, how did this happen? The inquiries lasted months. Inquiries are official investigations where people ask questions to find answers. They interviewed survivors, crew members, officers, company leaders. And they decided. The Titanic sank because of overconfidence, poor decisions, and trying to save money. New laws were passed. Ships were required to carry enough lifeboats for every person on board. Ships were required to practice lifeboat drills. A 24-hour radio watch was mandated. Mandated means required by law. No more ignoring emergency signals. The International Ice Patrol was created to monitor icebergs. Monitor means to watch and check regularly. The Titanic disaster changed ship laws forever. Maritime means related to the sea and ships. But for the families of the victims, no law could bring back the dead. So what do we learn from the Titanic? First, arrogance is dangerous. The engineers said the ship was practically unsinkable. The press called it unsinkable. The passengers believed it. And that belief made them careless. They ignored ice warnings. They didn't slow down. They didn't take the danger seriously. Confidence is good. Overconfidence kills. Second, small decisions matter. The Titanic didn't sink because of one big mistake. It sank because of 7 small mistakes that happened at the same time. No binoculars, weak rivets, too few lifeboats, ignored warnings. Alone, these things might not have mattered. Together, they were catastrophic. In life, small decisions add up. The things you ignore, the shortcuts you take, the "it's probably fine" moments. They matter. Third, class and privilege decide survival. Privilege means special advantages that some people have because of money or position. First-class passengers survived at twice the rate of third-class passengers. Not because they were better people, not because they were smarter, but because they had easier access. They had information first. They had priority. Priority means being more important, being first. The Titanic reminds us that in dangerous moments, inequality becomes deadly. Inequality means unfair differences between groups. Fourth, heroism exists. Heroism means being brave and helping others even when it's dangerous. The musicians who played while the ship sank. The officers who stayed at their jobs. The men who gave up their seats so women and children could survive. Isidore and Ida Strauss, who chose to die together. In the worst moments of humanity, there is also the best. And finally, we learn that disaster can lead to change. The Titanic disaster was a tragedy, but it forced the world to create better safety laws. Because of the Titanic, ships today are safer, rules are stricter, lives are saved. Sometimes the worst moments teach the most important lessons. The Titanic sank 112 years ago. But we still talk about it, we still tell the story, we still remember. Why? Because it's not just a story about a ship. It's a story about human ambition. Ambition means wanting to achieve something great, human arrogance, human courage, human tragedy. It's a reminder that even the greatest achievements can fail, that even the strongest ships can sink, that even the smartest people can make deadly mistakes. But it's also a reminder that we can learn, we can change, we can do better. And for you as an English learner, this story taught you something else. It taught you that English is more than grammar and vocabulary. English is storytelling. When you listen to a story like this, a story with drama, emotion, suspense, tragedy, and hope, you remember the language. Suspense means exciting uncertainty about what will happen next. You don't just memorize the word survivor. You understand it, you feel it. You don't just learn the word arrogance. You see how it leads to disaster. That's the power of learning English through stories. So here's what I want you to do. Watch this video again, take notes, write down new words, look up their meanings. Then try to retell the story in your own words, out loud. Tell someone or tell yourself. Retelling is how you make the language your own. If you want more stories like this, real history, powerful lessons, clear English, subscribe to English Unlocked. We don't just teach English, we unlock it through the stories that change the world. The Titanic was called the ship of dreams. It became a nightmare. But the lessons it taught us, those are still sailing. Thank you for watching. Keep learning, keep listening, keep dreaming. Your English journey is unsinkable.